Hi, I'm Alan Finney, and this is what Ayahuasca told me to tell you. So this video is going to cover some serious topics about Ayahuasca, and this comes from a comment about one of my subscribers. And here's what he said. I've been to 4 ceremonies in Peru. I'm no expert, but I'd argue it would be irresponsible to not mention some of the cautions associated with doing ayahuasca. And he goes on to list the cautions. It doesn't mix with certain prescription drugs, heart conditions, etc. Also, there are fake shamans, brujas. Some shamans have sexually assaulted women during ceremonies. And here's a pretty big thing that I hadn't really heard about before. He says some people claim to have been possessed by malevolent spirits during ceremony, etc. And he thinks I need to put a warning on every video I produce. So, there's some very serious stuff going on here. And the sexual assault part of his question, I'll be dealing with in another video altogether. That's a serious topic, and it's just too much to get into in one video. So, today's topic, or topics really, ayahuasca and drug interactions. And can you get possessed by malevolent spirits in an ayahuasca ceremony, or die of a heart attack, or, any of the other stuff he's talking about? And more importantly for me, what are the chances of any of that happening? So, first thing he mentions is prescription drugs. And I've seen all kinds of information from researchers, and in particular, not taking anything like antidepressants that use MAO inhibitors, which are monoamine oxidase inhibitors, before you do a ceremony. But since a lot of people who want to take ayahuasca are looking to get off of antidepressants, maybe going to a ceremony is a good time to quit. One of ayahuasca's big pluses is getting people off of all kinds of drugs, legal and illegal. And I can't cover all the information about drug interactions in a little video like this. So if you're wondering about prescription or non-prescription drug interactions with ayahuasca, do some research. There's lots of credible information out there. And, I've heard that cocaine is a big one, not to mix with ayahuasca. And we did have a guy come into a ceremony once, and he had been doing cocaine that day. And he took ayahuasca and he just kind of laid there all ceremony. Of course he had lied to the shaman about his cocaine use. But next day he just got up and went home. So, and which brings me to your facilitator, or whoever's running your ceremony. And they should ask you about any prescriptions you have before you decide to go to their ceremony. This is just standard procedure, Ayahuasca 101. And if you're not being asked about this, personally, I wouldn't do a ceremony with that person. This is pretty basic stuff. So, next thing that he brought up is heart conditions. And ICEERS, which I consider to be a credible source of information, says this: in medical terms, ayahuasca has few contraindications. If you have a serious cardiovascular disorder, you shouldn't take ayahuasca, as it slightly increases blood pressure. So the question is, if you have a heart condition, will a slight increase in blood pressure give you a heart attack? If you think it will, don't take the medicine. So once again, just be aware of this and do your own research before you take ayahuasca. So, next thing on the list, fake shamans and brujas. And bruja or brujo is someone who is supposed to use ayahuasca for evil purposes. Brujo means witch or sorcerer in Spanish. And I'm not exactly sure what he means by fake shamans, but there are inexperienced people out there who think they're shamans or represent themselves as shamans, and they may be out to take your money or, whatever they're going to do. Again, this hasn't been my experience myself, but I always tell people, know who you're taking the medicine with. Get referrals, get recommendations, and avoid people who sound like scammers, or they just opened up shop last night. And, for me, this really applies to any important decision you're going to make in your life. Know who you're dealing with. Now, the second part of that question, I'm not sure what he means by brujos using ayahuasca for evil purposes, because he doesn't mention, what would that be? Are they going to enslave you in a zombie camp somewhere? I don't know. So I really don't know what evil purposes we're dealing with here, but maybe this will be covered off in the spirit possession question that's coming up. But just let me put this in context for you. There's a thing called ayahuasca tourism. In Peru, Iquitos is the epicenter of ayahuasca. When I was doing my own research, and this was a few years ago, I saw an estimate of 250,000 people a year going to Iquitos alone for ayahuasca. Ayahuasca is spreading all over the world. There's ceremonies going on every day on every continent. South America, the US, Europe, Asia. Are there going to be fake shamans or brujos out there? I suppose so. But like I said, just know who's giving you the medicine. Don't step off a plane in Iquitos and ask some hustler at the airport, hey, where can I get an ayahuasca ceremony? Which people have done, and to me, that's just being naive. And, the last thing the government of Peru or the reputable ayahuasca centers or the real shamans and, anywhere in the world is for people to go to Peru or anywhere else and get ripped off or mugged or, used for evil purposes. Whatever that means. So ask questions, ask around, be a little discerning, don't be shy. So, which now brings us to the really big one, your immortal soul. Can you get possessed by some malevolent spirit that might be hanging around in an ayahuasca ceremony? So I asked a bunch of shamans I know. Now, these are experienced shamans, and some of these shamans have quite literally conducted thousands of ceremonies with thousands of people. So Noe Lopez, he's a 7th generation lineage shaman in Peru. I asked him if people could get possessed in ayahuasca ceremonies. And, I think he was kind of messing with me, but he said, not in my ceremonies. And everybody else I asked pretty much said the same thing. It sure doesn't sound like a big concern with the shamans that I know. But I actually did get into a good conversation with Boris Galvez, who is an amazing Chilean shaman, and I had such incredible ceremonies with him. And he said that you can feel a lot of things in a ceremony, and sometimes you connect to other people in a ceremony. Ayahuasca was originally called telepathine by researchers in the 1900s because, it'd make you telepathic in their viewpoint. And you can definitely feel a connection to other people in a ceremony. And pretty much everybody experiences this at some point. So if somebody else in the ceremony is dealing with a particularly strong problem or has deep work that they're doing, you can sometimes feel the emotions from that. And for someone new to the medicine, you may not even, realize that you're connecting to somebody else. So Boris says you can feel like there's some dark energy outside of yourself. And especially if you have a lot of fear or you're from a religious background that believes in this sort of thing, you can mistake this for some dark entity in a ceremony. But it's not some evil spirit trying to possess you. It's just somebody working through whatever they're working through, and you're just happening to pick up on it. And, the other thing he said to me, which was a great insight for me, and I've actually experienced this, you're not only healing yourself, but you can be healing your family lineage. I had to address some big issues with my own father that probably related to his father and maybe his father before him, I don't know. But if you don't know what's in your family lineage, or you have a hidden trauma from your family of origin, once again, you might think you're dealing with some outside entity because you have no idea where those feelings are coming from. But the really nice thing, about all this is that once you deal with those things, they're are gone. Once you deal with it in the ceremony, it's gone. It's not some evil spirit trying to possess you. You're just getting rid of this energy and doing some family house cleaning. So, in my assessment, are you going to get possessed by an evil entity in an ayahuasca ceremony? I don't think so. I've certainly never felt at risk. But being a former journalist, I always like to put things in perspective. And I always like to look at the odds. So what are the odds of any of this happening? Let's take the people people going to Iquitos. If 250,000 people a year are going to Iquitos alone for ayahuasca, never mind the rest of the world, and if just 1% of those people died of heart attacks or got mugged or got possessed or used for evil purposes, that would be 2,500 people a year. And if it was like 0.01%, that would be 250 people a year. And if that was happening, the mainstream media would be all over this, like ugly on an ape, especially about ayahuasca. And, again, my answer to all of this, know who you're dealing with. Sit with established shamans at established centers. And there's lots of online resources out there about ayahuasca, so ask around. And if, somebody sounds iffy, cross them off your list. Don't be shy. If your potential shaman can't answer your questions, take them off your list. There's lots of credible people out there. And, just to put the whole thing in perspective, in the United States alone, 135 people a day are dying from prescription drug overdoses. And as far as I know, this isn't stopping anybody from prescribing drugs or taking prescription drugs. Just Google the opioid crisis. Opioids are government-approved prescription drugs, and people are dropping like flies, and families are being destroyed. In my experience, ayahuasca heals families. It's not tearing them apart. So anyway, just to wrap things up, the bottom line for me is that if people were taking ayahuasca and routinely getting possessed by spirits or attacked by brujos, I'm pretty sure, the internet being what it is, you'd hear a lot more about it. Having said that, if you do have any credible sources of information on any of the topics I've covered here, and you think I've misrepresented something, by all means, let me know. I'd love to hear from you. In my own experience, the people I've met in my ayahuasca journey have been just amazing. And I've never felt like I was ever in any danger in an ayahuasca ceremony. And really, it was quite the opposite. And the best advice I can give you is that if you think you're going to get mugged or ripped off by fake shamans or, die of a heart attack in a ceremony or get possessed, heaven forbid, in an ayahuasca ceremony, don't take ayahuasca. Ayahuasca isn't for everybody. There's lots of different therapies out there, and if this is your mindset, maybe ayahuasca isn't the right therapy for you. So until next time, I'm Alan Finney, and this is what ayahuasca told me to tell you.